The coach shook his head slowly and asked Dad the big question, the question that everybody in the gym had to be asking. Why? Dad worked his jaw muscles at a complete loss for words. At the same time, he loosened his grip on my shirt. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that the coach had an emergency exit door of his own. I didn't hesitate. I hit that red bar at full speed and never looked back. I sprinted across the parking lot, around the football stadium, and out onto Route 89. I ran for my life at full speed, like I was sprinting down the sideline of an endless soccer field. I kept that pace up all the way to Lake Windsor Downs. I veered off onto the perimeter road and stumbled along over the packed dirt until I found myself at the wall behind her house. Then I stopped still, clutching my side, grasping for air, doubled over in pain. When I was able to, I looked up at the wall. The paint had been cleaned off, but the words still faintly visible in the moonlight. Seagulls suck. I stood studying that wall for many minutes. Then I felt headlights on me, too high up to be a car headlights. I turned and watched the Land Cruiser pulling up slowly and unevenly in the rutted dirt. Eric and Arthur stayed inside for a minute, invisible behind the tinted glass. Then a bolt of light shot into my eyes, snapping my head back. It was the Land Cruiser's center spotlight, huge, bright, and powerful, like a setting sun. Eric and Arthur opened their doors and got out, leaving the motor running and the headlights on. They stepped around in front so that the lights were on me while they remained in shadow. Still, I could see their faces were swollen and bloody. I could see that Eric was holding a metal baseball bat in one hand. I understood that I was supposed to be terrified by the spectacle. These two demonic creatures on this dark, lonely road, but for once in my life, I wasn't. I stepped forward and faced them, just as I had seen Luis do. I held my hands out, as he had done, and said, "I'm not afraid of you, Eric. Come on." Eric stood in his pose, not moving, but Arthur did move. He produced the blackjack and began to tap it into his hand. I thought to myself, can you really be that stupid? Can you really still be carrying around the murder weapon? When they finally spoke, it wasn't terrifying. It was lame. They started out in the same routine as always. Eric made his remarks and Arthur repeated them, as if nothing in their pathetic lives had changed. As if they had not just been beaten up by a pair of 7th graders in front of the entire football team and 500 other people. Eric posed and talked, and then Arthur repeated, "You're going to pay for what happened tonight. Oh yeah, you're going to pay. You're going to wish that it never happened. Oh yeah." I couldn't stand it. I took another step forward and challenged him. "Come on, Eric, let's see if you can do any better with me than you did with Tino." Eric stopped, his rhythm broken. I could see that his nose was pushed over to one side. He tried to ignore my interruption. He poked the bat at me. "We'll decide what's going to happen to you. We'll decide. Maybe you'll be in the right place, but maybe it'll be the wrong time. Oh yeah, it'll be the wrong time, and then it'll happen." I took another step forward. Now I could see the swelling around Arthur's eyes. I said, "I've already been in the right place at the wrong time, you low-life creeps, you pathetic losers. I was on the bleachers on Tuesday afternoon." I raised my finger like it was loaded, and I pointed at Arthur. "I saw you kill Luis Cruz." Arthur's swollen eyes widened, and he took a step backward. Eric shot a quick look at him, then he turned back to me. "Who's going to believe you, you blind little geek? You're blind. You can't see 10 feet in front of you. Nobody's going to listen to you." Eric stared at me with a growing fury, with growing hatred, moving the bat in a tight circle. I could see that his eyes, too, were starting to swell closed. I ignored him. I continued to speak to Arthur. "And I'm not the only one that saw it." Eric snapped. "He's lying." But Arthur Bauer had had enough. He said, "Come on, let's get out of here." Eric shouted, "He's lying, he's lying, he's lying," until he completely lost control. He started smashing the bat into the mud ruts in front of him, grunting with rage at every blow. He turned and unleashed a furious shot at the right head of the Land Cruiser. The glass exploded, sparks flew, and the lights sputtered out. Arthur's voice was trembling, pleading, come on, let's get out of here." Eric was still in his rage. He was talking to Arthur Bauer, but he was staring at me when he roared, "Shut up, Castor!" Then deep breath by deep breath, the rage started to recede. Eric backed up, step by step. He turned and threw the bat into the Land Cruiser. He got in, and Arthur got in, and then they drove quickly. They drove away, leaving that name, Castor. hanging in the air like some horrible apparition, like the key to a lock, like the solution to an unsolved crime. I turned my head slowly back toward the wall and remembered something from long ago. A silver gray wall. It surrounded a development called Silver Meadows, where we lived when I was 4 and 5 years old. I remember Castor, Vincent Castor. He was Eric's goon back then. He followed Eric around and did whatever he was told. I remembered spray paint on the wall. Eric and Vincent Castor had found a spray can of white spray paint, and they had painted something on that gray wall. I don't even know what it was. I never did. I just knew that Eric and Vincent Castor had done it. All the kids in the development knew that, but I never told anybody about it. I remember coming out to play in the morning and not being able to find any of my friends. Where were they? Did they know something? Did they know what was about to happen to me? I remember walking into our garage and hearing Eric's voice, cold and menacing. He said, "You're going to have to pay for what you did." I said, "What? I didn't do anything." You're going to have to pay for telling on Castor. You told who spray painted the wall, and Castor got into trouble. Castor doesn't like getting into trouble. I turned around and saw Vincent Castor. He was holding a can of spray paint. Then I felt Eric grab me from behind, easily pinning both of my arms with just one of his. I could hear my voice crying, "I didn't tell! I didn't tell!" I remember Eric's fingers prying my eyelids open, while Vincent Castor sprayed white paint into them. They left me screaming and rolling around on the floor in the garage. Mom came out and tried to drag me over to the hose and rinse out my eyes, but I fought like a wild cat. She managed to push me into the back seat of the car and drive me to the hospital. Somewhere around that time, so they say, there was an eclipse of the sun. I didn't remember that, but I remembered all the rest. I stood for a little while longer until I was sure there was nothing else to remember. I climbed over the wall, hopped down, and crossed the yard to the back door. Mom and Dad were sitting on the stools at the breakfast nook, looking at a yellow legal pad when I walked in. They were ready to jump on me, no doubt about it, but I jumped first. I said to Mom, "Do you remember Vincent Castor from Silver Meadows?" Mom and Dad looked at each other. There was no question about it. They remembered. "Do you remember him, Mom? Dad?" "He was the Arthur Bauer of his day." Mom turned deathly pale. She said, "What's all this about, Paul?" Dad tried to regain control. "Listen, there are questions that need to be answered about tonight." I exploded. No, sir!" I yanked off my Coke bottle glasses and shook them at him in rage. "There are questions that need to be answered about these. Am I such a stupid, idiot fool that I stared at a solar eclipse for an hour and blinded myself? Is that who I am? Am I that idiot?" They didn't answer. They didn't look at me. They didn't even seem to be breathing. Dad was looking down at the yellow legal pad when he said, "You were 5 years old, Paul. There was only so much you could understand. All you could understand was that something bad had happened." Mom spoke with her eyes closed, as if she wasn't really there, as if she were coming in over the radio. "I was so terrified that you would be blind. But the news wasn't all bad. They told me that you would not be blind. They told me that your eyes would heal slowly." Her eyes opened, but her voice started to fade. "They told me that you might lose your peripheral vision, or you might not, but you would not be blind. That was the good news." But then Mom started to cry. With her face still frozen like a statue, she started to cry. I lowered my voice and said to her, "Let me ask you one thing, Mom. When you got home from the hospital that day, did you see the white paint on Eric's hands?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Did you know what happened?" "Yes." No one spoke for a couple of minutes. Dad continued to examine the legal pad in front of him. Then he said, "The doctors told us that you might never remember," and he figured that that was the best way to handle the situation. He shook his head sadly. "We wanted to find a way to keep you from always hating your brother." I answered, "So you figured it would be better if I just hated myself?" That did it. Dad was finished. He broke down. It was frightening to see. He didn't cry like a statue. He cried like a baby. After a minute, I left them sitting there, snuffling and feeling sorry for themselves, and I came upstairs. That brings me up to Joey's phone call, asking me if I'm all right. I am all right. I'm more than all right. Finally. Thanks for coming by. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bob, I hope you know I only do that for you.